All right, guys, let's do a trade recap from today. Actually, let's start with IWM because that was the loss of the day, and that's actually what sent me red about like 370, and then Apple, the little bit of downside that I experienced on that from the sell-off today. I think I went max like 420, but I ended up being like kind of around like that 390, 420 area. And then I took SPX. I'll show you guys that in a minute here. But IWM was pretty simple. I mentioned this yesterday, and the fact that we basically because this pattern should be very familiar for you, and this is like kind of like a protection, right? Or once a gap fills, you expect buyers to step in, and we started to see this gap here on IWM get defended right around 193.64, and it was really evident on the hourly, right? If we go to the hourly chart here, notice every single time it either got down a little bit below the low of that 193.64 or right at that level, we saw very high volume, like right here, right? We saw a cluster of high volume without a low. We saw another high volume break under, close back above with a very, very high volume here, right? And then we noticed here, their hammer, I guess you could say this is a hammer, just the downside wick is all that really matters on this. Close back above, very high volume, right? And then we get to the top. You guys notice every time it gets to the top and it sells off, it's either on a gap down or just low volume in general. So there's not really an interest to sell it down. So, we saw it here, right? High volume. And then this finally broke under and it recovered all the way back through. This was very, very, a very top watch out for me. I know just in general, the cool CPI would have been cool to be able to hit this and maybe some of the smaller cap names or mid cap names in the Russell Index. But it is what it is, right? I mean, it kind of opened up right at that level this morning. I think I took this on a 5-minute chart, so we'll take a look at this, where we had this nice initial bounce. And then we got kind of this tweezers here, and this is where I ended up taking the trade. I was green on it by like 10% or so. I think I was in at 5.1, then went to 5.9 or something like that. And then ultimately ended up failing and breaking under the level. I closed here on this 755 candle. And then we saw this obviously start to kind of come down. And that was really the gist of it. Once we ended up losing the level, we had a 5-minute candle close below. I was out of this position. Ended up being a bigger loss than I would have liked percentage-wise, but it still wasn't that bad. So let's jump into the next one. Yeah, this was the only other trade of the day. This was a SPY, and I want to mention this because this is a psychological thing where you'll end up finding like an A+ setup intraday that aligns with your daily, weekly, just like your higher time frame, right? And what you'll end up doing is coming off of that loss, you'll size down, right? You'll be protective of your account, which is totally normal, but you have to kind of get through that barrier and understand like, hey, this is a setup that I would take night and day, and just kind of keep your sizing the same throughout. If you guys are familiar and you guys were looking in the chat, I put this in the lotto section. As I mentioned in the previous section, I was down about like 390, 420 on the account total for the day. Up for the week, and I didn't want to go heavy because anytime I typically trade SPX, I'll go 15 to 20 contracts. That would have been a huge hit. Mind you, the risk wasn't too bad for what I was initially planning. I ended up going with one contract with zero, sized for zero, so I would have let that thing come all the way to low a day. At that point, it would have probably been down like 60, 70%. I wouldn't have cared. But this is the setup, right? I want you guys to know essentially what I had marked. If you guys were in general chat last night, I will toot my horn. This was pretty sick, right? We were kind of looking for the market to gap up on CPI. And if you guys remember, I had this little thing drawn out like this. It was kind of like here, and then we were looking for a retracement down into the previous week high, right? I thought this would be the sell-off. I didn't expect it to recover back up towards the external. I guess this is technically like the internal range on a higher time frame, but towards this 477.50, right? I didn't think it would do something like this that quickly. Unfortunately, it did. But yeah, this is what we saw the bounce, the recovery off of it, and then what we wanted to look for was some kind of confirmation back above that level, tie it into what I had marked as the previous day high, right? So let's take a look here really quickly, or it was the previous day low, so I'm sorry. So if you pull that spot there, right? So let's get rid of this green box, right? So once again, restarting this, we have the previous week high, right? Now going back into the daily, we have previous day low. So we had this small little pocket that you guys can see here. I'll try to get this little zone as nicely as I can. It's not going to work. There we go. Can I grab it? Ah, shit. I promise, guys, this is exactly how I had it marked. There we go. Boom. Okay. So this is what it ended up looking like, and we ended up obviously bouncing off of this level initially, and this is where I was planning to go short. If you guys were part of that looking for the short with me, remember, just kind of grab the high to the low because we are trending down. We were looking for this to push up into this fair value gap here, which almost lined up with the 0.5, right? If you guys don't know, the 0.5 is kind of like your discounted equilibrium, so you're looking for price to at least get to that spot so your contracts aren't premium amount, right? You're getting somewhat of a discount. We never actually got to that. You guys can see we were just shy of it. So let's just say theoretically we ended up getting, we took the short here, right? So let's say we took the short here, right? And then we're looking for, this is the issue though. If you end up taking an SPX or a SPY, let's say it gets up to the 618, that's a pretty big risk if you're looking at that, right? That's about $1.25 of risk. If you're trading SPX, that's obviously more, and then you're looking for the low of day, right? If we take a look, technically that's still a good trade. That's a 2.5R. I look for anything that's at least a 2. So that technically would have been a good trade. It just depends on how heavy you size your risk, what you're putting into the trade and how much you're able to stomach based on an account by account basis, right? But I was hoping that we can get closer to the level, right? Maybe get up to, I was hoping like at least the fair value gap. I could have risked that. That's a 3.3R, as you can see. Let's say we actually get perfectly to, the 618. What we could have technically have risked was the orb low. Yeah, this is the orb low here. From the 618, that's a 5R. And you guys can see, right? It gets better the more, or I guess the tighter that your risk is. That would have been a really nice trade, but we actually never got this trade. I didn't want to pull the trigger early because it never technically touched the fair value gap. It never got into our discounted array. So I let this one go. This would have been a really nice trade. I think contracts went from 0.6 that I was looking at to like 3.20. Hindsight, that's a great trade. That probably could have been our day. It just didn't touch exactly where I wanted. And then what ended up happening was the sell-off underneath our spot, right? And then this is where I actually wanted to show you guys where, we'll just keep it as is. But if we end up taking a look at the weekly one more time, right? All this really was it was essentially from the high, right, to the open of last week on the weekly candle. Let's make this like a blue little thing here. We'll go like that. We end up taking a look now of what this did. Let's go back to the 15. All it did was it tapped in to the weekly from the high to the open, and it kind of just held here, right? Remember, I've been talking all week too that there's been dark pool levels non-stop from 468 to 476 or 470, like I think it's 473 like 5, right? We've been talking about it all week. All that's happening is it's selling off, getting accumulated via dark pool, right? And they're not playing puts on the downside. What they're doing is they're selling shares, right? They're selling shares and then they're going into their spots where they're accumulating in the dark pool. And then what they're doing is they're playing calls. If you guys saw what I posted today on NetFlow, there were 0 puts in the market, but the market was selling off. It's because what they're doing is they're distributing the equity up here. Then they're playing, they're obviously selling the equity. And then as it hits these bottoms or these local bottoms, they're just buying calls, right? And they're sending the market up. That's why we saw such a big drop off in calls, because they're taking profits via, can anyone guess? Calls, right? It's pretty simple. This is what I like to call rewashing, if you guys ever hear me say that. But, right, all this really did was tap into the weekly high versus the weekly open from last week. That's our blue area. Things started to get accumulated here in that weekly range in tandem with a lot of our dark pool levels. Now, if we just delete this, this is where I actually got ready for the trade. Right, this ended up pushing up and getting back above our previous week high, right? This is 473.67, tied in to the purple line, which is our previous day low, right? This is a fundamental thing. We get back into our range after a lot of people probably got trapped trying to short a new low here, not really understanding we're still within a very, very critical spot, right, from previous week. Also just kind of knowing, and this is like kind of our own little edge here in the Discord, that this was a very, very key dark pool level down here, right? They were just accumulating under the lows, and what ended up happening was the low kind of got a micro higher low, and then we pushed out and we finally got a very meaningful higher low where we had a break of structure. We're now back within the initial daily range, right, which is this spot here. We're now claiming 473.67, which is the previous week high. The purple line, which is previous day low. This is a huge spot. What do we get? Right? And this is what I wanted you guys to look at. Was kind of like this flag formation here. Not the most perfect one I've drawn, but just a flag formation where we had this very, very nice pullback here. Volume wasn't super low, you know, what you'd want to see, but still, it's a good risk reward. We can just risk a break back below 473.67. I probably would have been out if you wanted to be more risk tolerant, right? You could have risked the low of day, but this is where I ended up taking SPX. I ended up risking one contract, which was about $270, and we got a really nice pop. Now, mind you, we are in a pretty nasty downtrend, right? So if we kind of pull the high and we just reestablish what our low was, because this has now been consolidated quite longer than this low was here, right? We can now kind of establish, hey, this is probably our low, right? This is consolidated a lot longer. It's built a really good base. What you want to look for now is still a short, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with going short here, but what you'd want to target if you are going to go long off something that has this good of an R multiple is simply the 618, right? This is what I was initially targeting, was this the bounce off of this spot. I was looking to reshort this 470, I think it's 475.88, which was the 618. I would have been out of that trade. But what ended up happening was obviously some kind of excess push, and it ended up breaking all the way to 477. And we saw a really nice move on those contracts. I wish I would have held. Personally, I took it from 2.7 to 4.2, 4.3. I don't know what my exact fill was, but it was still like right around 60-70%, which I can't argue with. But the reason I'm upset is I was trying to protect my account and just get back to break even on the day. Had I just, said fuck it and just done my traditional size without overthinking it, I would have had 20 contracts for a 70% win. That's insane, right? Especially for how little of time I spent in this trade. I kind of got in like right around here. I got in out at like the 0.5 range. I mean, dude, I was in there for what? Maybe, 50 minutes, maybe an hour, and I could have doubled my money essentially. So kind of sucks that I did that, but I did basically come away flat on the day. Tesla ended up having a nice move as well. Apple obviously recovered, so I pretty much was flat. But had I held these up to the 618 here, we got this spike through. I think these contracts went to 800, so 2.7 to 800, just like that, just by holding a little bit longer and actually following through with my trade plan. And then the excess, I probably would have had a runner or two for this, but these contracts did hit about $1,200. So that's the power of options, man, and like the power of just being patient. Not over, I guess, over exaggerating your losses. I know a lot of us tend to do that and like think the world's ending. IWM, yeah, sucks we lost, but it was a good loss in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. Just accepting that loss is a huge thing in your growth. I'm at that point where I'm able to just kind of brush off losses, and hopefully you guys are too. But yeah, this was a good win. This was a really good win. Just sucks that I only had one con, or else I would have been able to hold it a little bit longer, right? I would have probably have trimmed like 15 to 10 at the 0.5 and then held like the rest with a stop break even. I probably would have gotten that $800 level and maybe held a runner for the excess above, but it didn't happen that way. It is perfectly okay. You guys will see these trades time and time and time again, and you just got to be patient for these. It sucks too. I mean, I really wish that this trade would have worked out here, because I know a lot of you guys like to trade this, right? You get this high up here where remember, this is something else I want to emphasize too. Remember, we were talking that we expected it to push into 477.55 and potentially up to 480, but it doesn't mean you catch this candle. That is so silly, right? Let's say you end up catching and shorting this candle, and all it does, right? Let's say it kind of breaks down a little bit here, and then it pushes out, and it does something like this. What are you going to cut at, right? Because you're willing to go short in any point in between this, right, and then 480. Are you just going to hold all the way to 480? What if 480 just ends up being a higher low here and it starts to keep, what if it keeps rallying? And that's the thing that you get stuck in, and that's why we don't want to time tops, because then look how skewed this is. Let's say you got in like right around here, right? That's your short. Oh, I did the long. Let's say this is your short entry, right? And then you end up extending your risk all the way to that. Now your risk reward is completely fucked. Let's say you end up getting it. Let's say you were targeting the area that we were targeting, 473.67. Look at your RR. you make so much potential. This is a huge gain. For how much you're risking, that's a 1.5R. That does not make sense, guys. That does not make sense to do that. That's why I was so adamant and kind of just sitting on my hands all day today, and really just being patient to get to this short here, risk the 15-minute open, or I guess the 15-minute orb, and then from there, right, that becomes such a better trade. Had we gotten, let's just say that, right, let's say we got something, well, technically I wanted the 618, I think it was like right around here, right, and then we wanted the low. Once again, that's like a 4 to 5R. That's so much better than a 1.5 with a risk that was as extreme as it was had you shorted the high of day without a confirmation. We want structural shorts. We want really good R multiples. We want to make our risk as tight as possible with our reward as high as possible. And that is how you end up being successful at trading. A lot of this is patience too. I know tomorrow, kind of going into next week, I already have a note that I've been jotting down. Is that once again, I need to slow down. I keep trading the open so quickly because I feel like I have a read on price action, which there's nothing wrong with, but just an improvement that I got to make. But yeah, guys, this was a nice trade. This was such a good trade here. I wish I would have sized into my traditional size, but it is what it is. I just basically finished the day 1 for 1. I closed the SPY runner that I ended up having from yesterday or 2 days ago, whenever we took that for the 90, 100%. And that's it. There's nothing else you can do. You have 3 good days. You can't really force a fourth good day. That's ridiculous in my opinion. That's like the instant gratification mentality. If you have a fourth day that's just subpar, or I even started the day red, if we can just bring it back to a decent amount, I'll take it. Nothing wrong with it. But yeah, looking to build upon this from Friday. I'm still not going to overextend myself and try to get that fourth green day out of a 5-day work day or 5-day work week. If I have a break-even day tomorrow or if I finish slightly red, I'm cool with that too. I had a really good 3 days. But yeah, hopefully we end up kind of getting something tomorrow. We'll see what PPI brings us. I have a general idea, but I try to be careful with what I think will happen and just try to trade the chart. So that's pretty much that, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed just 2 trades today. Nothing super crazy. And these are normal. There's nothing wrong with these. And there's a couple trades I missed. There's a couple trades I hit. I guess there's a couple trades that I missed. There was a trade that I hit that I should have had more on, and it's just part of the psychology that a lot of people probably won't talk about. And it's just about getting over those hurdles. And if you see a good setup that forms itself, don't be afraid to take it, and don't be afraid to size how you typically size. That's why it's so important to just be robotic. Be robotic. Be robotic. Don't let these ulterior things get into your head. Just trade the same way every single time. And yeah, that's going to be the recap for today. I look forward to hanging out with you guys tomorrow. See you then.